I was thinking about what to title this stream. I actually sat around for maybe 20 minutes just debating. At first, I was going to discuss what things I think are insignificant or otherwise not a big deal. Stuff that I see other people talk about. And I just go, oh, is this really anything that actually matters? Um, but I realized that my disposition toward them, following that stuff really isn't. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think I'd rather focus on something I actually care about than talk about something I don't, even if the point I'm making is why other people shouldn't care about it either. Um, and I tried to explain before that with me, I've always said because I'm aware of the finicky nature that people oftentimes have when it comes to being into things that they themselves aren't into. I sometimes will excuse differences I have with others. My best friend, for example, as I've mentioned, is not into politics. Um, but I always give him the benefit of the doubt because he's the kind of person who, in spite of not being into something or looking it up themselves, if it's relayed to him in a abridged manner, he will not only retain this information, but he will also actually listen and focus on it. And I think with him, I tried to experiment and say to myself, is it really a bad thing that this person does not know this, or is it a bad thing that people refuse to learn it? Because I've had some people I've tried to sit down, explain, the state of corruption, Citizens United, all of that, and they reject that evidence or they otherwise show their outright disillusion. And I always took that to be more of a personal insult because when you're doing something in front of a person, the person can tell your mannerisms, the way you are interacting with them. So it's really not that hard if you're not interested in something to go, oh wow, yeah, cool. But the fact that you won't even pretend or attempt to hide your disposition with this topic is all the more suggestive of what it actually is. Just like, for example, I was talking to a person about the New Deal because I had said, I guarantee you, if they ever did a poll where they asked most Americans or Americans in general to name 12 presidents, like a fourth of them basically, most people probably couldn't do it. I would wager maybe 60, 70, likely 80%. And I would say it's not the fact that they can't name them that's the issue, but if they could name them, what do they know about them? Um, and really, it's always been for me a thing of understanding that people don't have the same situation or circumstance that you have, where they can go and look some of this stuff up in their leisure, or the same, just ability to do this. Some people don't have the internet. Some people don't have someone that says, "Hey, go learn about this." So I try to be mindful of that, um, and that's why oftentimes when I speak to people who think that we might not get along because they're not into this topic, I say, no, it's not a prerequisite that you know a certain amount of things or that you're into this as well. I just want someone who actually will pay attention to what I have to say about this. And what oftentimes seems to be the case when I go on places like YouTube or Twitter or whatever other website is that there's this large group of people who are really into one thing. And then if you ever mention something that's not that topic, usually they're off put by it or they otherwise won't bother to listen to it. And it's kind of been the same thing here with the people who were, I guess, interested because of the relationship stuff. I said, look, that's something I feel I've spoken about until I've been blue in the face. Um, and it's also something that I just don't think is as interesting or as easily discussed as the current political circumstance. It's not rapidly changing. There isn't a new law being signed into every day or some different circumstance that occurs as frequently. So that was my reason for not wanting to just solely dedicate myself to that type of topic. But also, I had never really been into that period. I just kind of said, well, I kind of want people to know that there's someone else who might not discuss this that often, but is still affected by it. Um, and oftentimes, when you go and you watch a lot of the commentators in response to this, they'll say, "Oh, this person is you know having this circumstance because of this thing I've been able to point out." And I think I've said before that when I read those comments, it almost feels like I have AIDS because you say to yourself, you don't like what this person talks about. You don't like their political views. You don't like the stuff with any of the relationship content. Why do you stay? But it's that same kind of mentality that I've never been able to figure out, because generally differences that I think are massive, like a entirely different worldview, disincentivize me from wanting to speak to someone or interact with them. For example, I have in many instances stopped speaking to people who don't like Sanders, and I've done that because a lot of times what they like to do is shame a person who didn't want to vote for Hillary or some other, major party candidate for the reason that one side, one or the other. And I say, look, I don't favor this person because I have a set of beliefs that they have never attempted to appeal to or otherwise make any actual believable gestures toward. I had a person who I spoke to a couple of days ago where we were talking about Harris, the current junior senator from my state who's running for president. And I had mentioned that I don't believe she would be someone who actually is going to do something about marijuana legalization because she only came around to it a couple of months ago. And the person said, "Oh, well, she changed." So I said, "No, no, no. You don't see an issue as popular as legalizing marijuana, be opposed to it your entire career, then suddenly, after supporting it, claim that you yourself used to smoke as well." So it was kind of it's just people want to give each other the benefit of the doubt when there's just nothing to support that. But that's how the human mind works. A lot of times when I go and I watch the commentators who are oftentimes involved with going and making this kind of content, they will stick to one topic or subject, and then when they speak about something else, they get attacked. I was watching MBA, who is a person who makes content about anime and other content, usually relating to Japanese material. But he was making a video. He was responding to a lot of the people that were attacking him over being neutral in the whole Vic Mignogna thing that's going on right now. And I watched his video because I like to not take someone at their word, but at least get what they have to say or try to understand what they're saying. And I watched it. I said, well, I'm someone who supports Vic or otherwise is more inclined to believe him than believe his accusers. And I wasn't upset at all with what he was saying. So it's kind of that thing of, these are people who, when he was just making his regular content, oh yeah, you're cool, fine. But then when he decides to have a position that is opposed to their own, suddenly he gets backlash. And I think, my whole thing, as I've said before, with the being aware of your own insignificance, is that if I were to stop watching or supporting a, let's say, candidate for office or someone who's making YouTube videos or just anyone in general, I would not announce to them on my page or their page that I am now withdrawing my support. I would just stop supporting them. If they're a content creator, I just wouldn't watch their content anymore. I've never done that where after leaving someone's thing or thinking about leaving them, tell them, "Oh, you must change this or I'm going." And I've actually seen one person do that before on a separate video of mine where they were talking about they disagreed with my position on the relationship stuff, and it was really jarring because I don't recall ever changing my mind. So this person literally subscribed to someone who they knew disagreed with them or otherwise was opposed to their view, and then became pissed off after that person wouldn't change their opinion because they themselves demanded it as if they're God or Jesus or something. They have so much power over me. And in the meantime, I've decided to cut all ties or otherwise not become interested in supporting my content anymore. But I said, look, that's not something that bothers me because I was consistent. I didn't change my view before and not after. And that's them being intolerant to a perspective that's not their own. And I do understand where there are certain things we don't want to tolerate. So for example, as I mentioned before, I have a lower tolerance for people who I know personally that try to say something negative about Bernie. But again, that's not me saying I think all criticism directed toward him is ridiculous or illegitimate. I oppose him on BDS. I think that Jewish people need to be the ones to say the Israeli government is, murderous and actively harming Palestinians, because anyone who's not Jewish, like myself, gets called anti-Semitic. So, I can go down the list of things that he and other politicians have said that I don't agree with. But when I see these criticisms and they're over things like he made Hillary lose the election, I instantly get off put by that and don't want to speak to that person anymore, because they're not actually discussing the merits of this person's record. They're just talking about this one election and, never live it down. You get immediately smeared with that for the rest of your career. Same thing with the people who were upset with Gillibrand over Franken. I don't believe Franken was some rabid monster as he was made out to be by Fox and a lot of the other networks, but he chose to resign on his own. Now, was Gillibrand doing that to get political points? Probably, but it's not, it shouldn't overtake her record as the main reason why someone shouldn't vote for her. But again, these are the kinds of things where when I see these critiques, they disincentivize me from wanting to talk to that person anymore, because they're not based on an actual gripe with what that person's done in office. Um, you can look at the same reaction that we've seen off of a couple of different commentators on here, where you had people going after Geekdom for not taking a stand on the Vic case, and I said, look, if he wants to not talk about this, then don't leave him alone. Don't watch him. But I've still seen people go on his page and go, "I'm sick of you not saying anything." Yeah, like, what does that do? If someone has loads and loads of subscribers, not even the 600,000 he almost has, but just like 1,000, me as one person is not going to change their content or their mind. I said before, I think that whenever you have content creators and they try to take a stand on anything, they're generally going to have a portion of the people that watch their stuff who are going to be off put by it. That's why I know when I make political stuff, the people who like the relationship content are not going to come to watch it. But that's not new to me. That's not something I just discovered recently. It's been there the entire time. That's why I try to mix both of them together as a means of attempting to satisfy at least a chunk of people who are into both things. So it's a never ending struggle where you actually do have some people who will just say, okay, well, screw you, I'm going to do whatever I want. And I don't want to get to a point where this content does not have, some kind of influence by the people who watch it. Now, I don't want it to be influenced by people who go and say, oh my God, I don't agree with your position, you're stupid, bleh. But, by those who say, hey, look, I watched this, I enjoyed it, but I might make this recommendation. Um, Even if I don't agree with it, it's still something I'm not going to actively be pissed about. I think the way someone communicates it is significant, however, just in determining if I'll do it or not. Because I oftentimes do have people who attempt to mask themselves as good or decent, and then they end up being snakes, which is exactly what is happening with this relationship stuff, where you have toxic masculinity, which has many males trying to make people feel bad for just talking about it. I'm not cursing up a storm. I'm not, calling anybody out their name or naming any of the people I'm talking about. It's just, hey, this is a problem I have with this group based off of their behavior, and that pisses them off. And look, I don't oftentimes brag about myself, but I do think I can communicate what I feel in a clear manner. There's some some uhs, but I still attempt to do. And some people don't enjoy that. But again, because we have this never ending, I think one of the biggest lies about society is that you have to try appealing to people in this thing of you can't say anything controversial, because everything you say will be disliked by someone. Um, and I know people don't want to believe that, but we actually did have a poll that came out about the minimum wage, where it shows most people want a higher one, but it was like 7 or 8% that said no, we need it to be reduced. We need to get even smaller. I said, well, look, if they're going to make it that way, where where you have this really itty bitty group who supports that really should be the testament to the idea that there is absolutely no position that everybody agrees on. But finding the line in the sand is what causes the discontent. Just like with me, I try to not exercise intolerance toward people who don't agree with my position, that politics is something that's important and that we should discuss and actively try to watch. So imagine my shock when the year before last, I had a person who got into an argument with me and tried to assail me as someone who had no friends or interactions with other people, which is ridiculous because just they don't interact with me enough to even know who I talk to. But that these are the kinds of things that they have to smear you with as a means of getting you to feel bad about yourself for not being the way they are. So diversity of thought, and from their perspective, was a bad thing that they had to lash out at me over, having or possessing. But when they insult me and I insult them back, it shouldn't be that much of a shock because I'm literally doing a defense of myself. It's kind of like how a lot of times people bemoan the Democrats for opposing Trump on everything. And I said, no, no, no. They're doing exactly what McConnell did to Obama, where, literally after the Republicans took over the House, a quarter of the way into Obama's tenure, they didn't help him. They didn't pass anything. Nothing ever became a law again. And it's all, so basically everything that's happened over the last 2 years with the resistance or whatever, it has its roots in those couple of years of the president before this one. But people really think that the Democrats are supposed to turn the other cheek. And I said, look, a lot of the stuff they oppose, they have some opposition to, I think is dumb. Just like all the ones that were losing their minds when Trump put out of Syria. That's not them having a position I support, but I get why they're doing it because they're brought up by defense contractors. But whatever. My point is they are motivated by money to be opposed to him and getting out of this conflict. Let me say hello to Dree. I don't know what he was saying true to. I'll just have to live with the mystery. But yeah, people don't realize that life is too short to keep. And that's, going back to the relationship thing, I tried to explain that when we were talking about why we think these women are picky, it's all based around the idea that when I would go around and talk to various women, I said to myself, you know what? This person is not religious. They're not the height I like. They don't have whatever. But if they were someone I was comfortable with, that was that. True to what you were saying about there is no idea 100% of people agree on. Yeah, but my thing is that we have this intolerance, and then we get surprised when someone is intolerant right back at us. And they don't seem to understand that when you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh no, it's okay for this person not to be into political things, and then I'm not supposed to insult that person for being an idiot when they insult me for being into things that are political. I could go out right now and say, I think if you can't name the last 12 presidents, you're dumb. But that's not going to actually move the conversation forward. I would rather lay out the case of why I think that's a reasonable standard to have, and why those ones are more significant than the 12 before that. So it's really just a thing of trying to exercise some consistency. A lot of times we don't really like to believe that there's a higher calling than just arguing back and forth online every day. And I guess that's kind of been my thing, where if you speak about a lot of the stuff, people try to assail you for it. So, for example, if I go and watch someone make a video about any of Sanders's ideas or any of these other Democrats, or rather any of the Democrats because he's independent, I would rather go into why I think their assailing or criticism is not well founded, and I would present some fact or statistic to go along with what I'm saying. I wouldn't just go, well, you don't agree with me, so you're stupid. Just like I remember I did a video about and I'll read your comment in a minute, Dree, but I did a video about Sinema, the Arizona candidate that won, the Democrat. She votes with Trump over 60% of the time, or 60% of the time, rather. So I said, expect her to be one of the few Democrats that does the thing that the resistance doesn't want them to do. And I had a person who, again, after hearing me mention what was proven by that site, they proceeded to then go and insult me. I said, look, you're not insulting me on the basis of facts or something that has to do with a record I didn't know about. You're literally going after me because, emotionally you feel this weird investment in this politician, to where if someone talks about their record and uses that as the proof or the basis for why they're making their claim about that person, you just get pissed. And I don't have time for that because it's not based on reality. So Dree says, no doubt, what do you do besides to get those thoughts out into the open? Yeah, you can't even talk to any of these people without them losing their minds in person. So you're kind of, that's why I said that out of all these social media websites, I still think YouTube is probably the best, because when you look at some of the stuff people write on the other ones, it feels like there's this weird thing where there's maybe 80% of people who are willing to write whatever online, and only about maybe 20 or 30% are actually want to get on the camera and speak it, and not try to hide or otherwise feel the need to you know protect their own identity. Kind of like that person I told you about who said that if you block no, not block, if you disable comments or ratings, you're a coward. And then he was hiding his face and wouldn't say his first name for over a year. Or for that was the same person who did that. And it was literally like the pot calling the kettle black, because you're trying to assert how much of a brave person you are for not doing those two things, when you've never even been in the position where you would do any of this stuff. Or rather, you are doing something that is even more quote unquote cowardly than anything else. Like I said before, I don't enjoy, because this person admitted they like debates. I don't enjoy going back and forth with someone over and over and over and never getting anywhere with it. Um, this has been very evident from a lot of the times I get a comment, I just don't respond to it. It's not because I can't argue with them. I just don't see the point in it. I think that when I talk, I repeat myself. I lay out the same case over and over again. And if you can't get it after I've said it multiple times, what else can I do? So this isn't about censoring anyone. This is, and again, they're free to make their own stuff and make the case for why they feel whichever way on their own channel. I've only ever seen one person do that, on that, like, leaves comments. I'm not even negative, but just out of all the commentators I've had that actually got on mic and started speaking about this stuff, I've only ever seen one person do that. And even then, they won't show their face. Now, I don't blame them, because, like I said, when I showed mine, I was told I was ugly, which, I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder. Somebody was bound to say I was unattractive at one point or another. I was criticized over my clothing, which, again, I'm not going to spend hundreds of dollars to buy a bunch of crap that I don't even like or wouldn't wear just so I could maybe get with someone. I was criticized over my glasses. I had one person who actually said if I didn't wear these, suddenly there would be this new influx of attraction. It would increase by 1%. So, anything you can think of, they've gone after me for. And because I know what it's like to be assailed for literally everything, I've been criticized of the way I speak, stuff in the background, anything you can think of. And again, none of that stuff is detrimental to me making a point, or otherwise being able to communicate, the key purpose of a video. But they're saying that because it's a difference in what they themselves would do. And you can see that from their refusal to make content themselves, or to put their voice to something, basically to do anything other than just write on other people's stuff. That doesn't make you lesser than me. It just means that I understand why you do it, because you in your head can't fundamentally figure out, hey, this person has a different way of doing things than I do. And I've too often seen people try to use it as the basis for why something is that way. I think that I've oftentimes tried to say that when you can live a life where your head is above water, as in you can afford where you live and all that, you're comfortable with yourself, and you don't see anything actively harming you. If the chick thing doesn't change, you have to start looking at the internal group. Just like I said to my friend, the one that my best friend that you heard on the channel back in June, the that one video we did together, the stream. I said, look, if this was just you that had this problem, okay, fine, maybe you can confess to having an issue, but even then, you're still able to go to school and live a very productive life in spite of this. But if you see it happening to me and this other person we interact with and people online, that means it's a bigger problem than just you. Just like when I made the case about the 76% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. I have had one user who tried to say that it's because people have children. I've had somebody else who tried to say it's because people buy random crap. Those two are definitely factors, but if it's literally almost 4/5 of the country, that's a failed system. That means there's something bigger than just the individual problem. I could see if there was like 20 percent and 70 percent were living well off or whatever, but that's not the case, and it's been that way for years. So there's a lot of issues that are going on. And people just have to accept that having a different lifestyle or doing something that you yourself wouldn't do is not the end of the world. A lot of people can go their entire lives without knowing that we're bombing 7 countries, that we have 900 military bases, that we have a D plus Reagan infrastructure, any of this stuff. They can completely not have to bother with it. But I do think that it's important. But I'm not going to bemoan someone for not paying attention to those particular things, because I'd rather try to advance my view. Have you ever thought about having this live disclosure with other people? What do you mean, other people on live? What do you mean, like one of those streams where I'm on one side, the person's on the other side, or what? Just to clarify, I just want to make sure I know what you're saying. Yeah, but my problem is a lot of times I don't know what the person is going to say. And I think that when you're talking off the cuff and you haven't polished yourself on it, you oftentimes can say something you might regret, and I don't want to have to go and then edit the thing because the other person goes, "Oh, I don't like what I said in that, and I don't want that to stay up." So that's one of my biggest hurdles with doing that. But look, I do oh, live and live. Yeah, free. Like I said, I made mistakes on here before when I was speaking. I still kept it up because I'm talking off the cuff. I don't have a script, and a lot of times I have to make attempts to know entirely where I'm trying to go with certain words and phrases. So I will end this. Thank you for watching. And like I said, we all have standards, but the perfect person does not exist. That's why I spoke to loads and loads of different women that had, didn't share my religion, didn't share my state, didn't share pretty much anything with me other than just a shared perspective on wanting to speak and see if the other person matched. That's why I have, two relatively close comrades or friends or whatever that are not into politics, whereas I obviously am, and you can tell by the content of the channel. I just recognize that there are stark contrasts between me and others, but I don't think it's the end all be all. So I think if more people had that, you wouldn't have the kind of infighting that we're seeing right now with any of this stuff. But into a toilet we go. So thank you.